How's everyone doing? It's almost lunchtime. Can we do one more panel and have a conversation? Let's talk about local news. How about that? All right. Well, thank you all for being with us. I know it's been a great action-filled morning. Everyone's getting their steps in, all of that. And we're really, really excited to be able to dedicate some time during the symposium and this morning to talk about local news and inclusive narratives. I think this is one of the first times that we've been able to have a really specific conversation about the role that local news plays in the narratives that surround us and all the things. And we're going to be able to talk about the power that our local news has in our communities, as well as how it ensures that we're informed citizens. So I know we spent a lot of time yesterday building up our educational base about what narratives are and how they funnel into public discourse, and everyone's really ready to dig into the how and the what. And before we get going too far, I just want to do a brief self-introduction. My name is Taryn Ford. I'm the Senior Director of Communications here at the Colorado Health Foundation. I am absolutely in a dual role mode today. As Karen mentioned yesterday in her opening remarks, our communications team at the foundation has the privilege of organizing this conference, and I'm usually putting people on the stage and not sitting on it. But I am just absolutely thrilled because the other opportunity I have in my role is to support some of our investing that we do in media and journalism. And so when we made the decision to focus on rewriting narratives for the topic this year, we knew it was absolutely imperative that we talk about the role of news and journalism. And so I have an amazing panel of individuals who I'm going to turn things over to here in just a moment. We've got a mix of journalists, but they're also community leaders and folks who are deeply, deeply passionate about the power of local news and inclusive narratives. And so if each of you could just, in a minute or a half or so, self-introduce, and Brittany, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Taryn. Hello, everyone. It's a delight to be here with you today and just share this space and community. It always feels so good as we, have our heads down on the screen, just to be in space together. My name is Brittany Winkfield. I am a journalist at heart. I'm currently at the Denver Urban Spectrum as associate publisher, and just have a long history of just always wanting to tell stories I started as a photographer, and just really believed in the power of storytelling and just how it reflected in my own community, how I was showing up in different spaces. So born and raised in Denver, Colorado, went to Rangeview High School and went away to Alabama. Had never been there before, but went to HBCU and really had an experience there that changed my life and added to my narrative and just how I'm pouring back now into my community. I think, it's just a privilege to be a storyteller, and can't wait to have this conversation. So I'll pass it to Melissa.
Great, thanks. It's such an honor to be up on the stage with all of these wonderful ladies who I work with pretty much every day. So in my role, I'm Melissa Davis. I'm with the Gates Family Foundation, no relation to Bill and Melinda. We're a Denver-based foundation. We've been around for about 76 years now, doing philanthropy. I'm also the director of the Colorado Media Project, which is a philanthropic initiative which Gates helped to start about 6 years ago, really looking at the changes in the local media ecosystem that have been happening over the last 20 years, and just the impact that it has on communities and our abilities to engage with each other and with elected leaders. And so really trying to hold space for that conversation and to involve more people beyond just the journalists that are really concentrated on that every day. And so I'm a former journalist myself. I'm from Toledo, Ohio. I grew up there. And I've lived a number of different places over the country as a journalist and also as a nonprofit leader and a philanthropic participant as well. So.
Great.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tammy Graham. It's good to be here. I drove up yesterday about 6.5 hours from my little community where I live, Mancos, Colorado, right at the base of Mesa Verde, almost as far southwest as you can get. And in Colorado, I call it Fort Cornea. I run KSUT. I'm the director of KSUT Public Radio, which is located on the home of the Southern Ute Tribe, tribal campus in Ignacio, Colorado, about 30 minutes south of Durango. It's a great privilege. KSUT has two distinct FM signals. One, the original signal, one of the first tribally founded public stations in the country in 1976 was to serve the Southern Ute tribe with information, news, stories, birthday celebrations back in, again, 1976. We now have, continue to have tribal radio, but we also are the NPR affiliate for the region, KSUT Four Corners Public Radio. I'm a Denver native, East High Angels. Any Angels in the house? Woo woo. Anyway, it's a great privilege to be here. I've been in the Four Corners for about 40 years now, which tells you how old I am, basically, if I went to high school in Denver. But it's wonderful to be here and be part of this conversation. I could not be more proud and excited about what's happening in Colorado with all the collaborations. We're really leading the way in the country for much due to a lot of the ladies sitting here today in terms of local news, storytelling, raising up narratives of the underserved and underheard. So also looking forward to this conversation.
Hi, I am Kim Salvaggio, and I'm the Chief DEI Officer and also the Chief Community Officer for Rocky Mountain Public Media. Rocky Mountain Public Media is your statewide PBS. We're also Kuvo Jazz and 104.7 The Drop. I'm from Hershey, Pennsylvania. I went from Hershey to Penn State University to New York City and found Colorado to be my home and where I want to be the rest of my life. I right now work on a number of different projects. I work with all of these, my colleagues up here, so it's really cool to be up here together to share what we've been working on. I'm a mediator, and I think that's probably prepared me really well to be also a certified DEI trainer and also leading a project called Above the Noise, which you're going to hear a little bit more about as we're talking up here. But I'm really grateful to be here, so thank you.
Thank you all so much. Wonderful self-introductions. I also just want to give a shout out to all of us who really appreciate the power of stories and storytelling. I think it's our most important currency. And I know a lot of you are here because of that, and you are, responsible for stories in a way that really matter. We're going to spend about 40 minutes in conversation this morning, and then we are going to do some Q&A with all of you. The way that we do Q&A is you've got some note cards on your tables. So if you have a question for anyone on the panel, please go ahead and write those questions out. And then we have some folks from the foundation staff who are going to be taking those cards throughout the course of this, and then we'll spend a little bit of time closer to the end of the conversation and hopefully answer some of the questions that you have. I think everyone's willing to stick around just a little bit as well. I know we're between you and lunch, but if additional questions are coming up for you all, we'll be kind of hanging out right over here. So I just want to talk just a little bit about, how the foundation is thinking about media. Karen mentioned in her opening remarks yesterday that we really view public discourse and the idea of advancing public discourse as a key lever for how we're creating social change in addition to all the other activities that we engage in, and grant making and policy and capacity building. And it's really given us an opportunity to think about the role that information and our information ecosystem plays in not just our discourse, but in our ability to be informed, our ability to be civically engaged. And we know that there are lots of different forces that drive our discourse. We've talked about a lot of them over the last day and a half. But local news is also one of those forces. The idea that news plays in terms of how we inform ourselves around how we civically engage and so many other things is just really important for us as we think about democracy. We've been investing in media since around 2018, and for us, it's not really about getting into that editorial firewall, right, that we all know about, that we shouldn't be messing with. We really want to make sure that local news is actually reflective of the people who call the community home. I know that all of us up here care a lot about that, and We also have other goals around making sure that sources can be really diversified for all of our journalists out there. We know there are lots of different collaborative opportunities. We're going to hear about that. As Tammy mentioned, there's just some incredible, innovative, entrepreneurial things happening in our state that we want to make sure everyone knows about. And we also think that there's an opportunity to really redefine the relationship between local news and newsrooms and nonprofits. I know a lot of folks in this room are from the nonprofit world, and we know that there's a lot more power that can be tapped into if that relationship is strengthened between the nonprofits and local media. So I am going to turn us over to our first question. We're going to talk about the importance of local news, and I'm hoping one of you can jump in on this. I want to just talk a little bit about how local news is contributing to the health of democracy, and maybe just a little bit on the flip side, share a couple of the shortcomings that we know everyone's kind of working to fill gaps around. Anyone takers?
Do you want me to do it?
Go for it.
So one of the things that the Colorado Media Project does is quite a lot of research, and there's a really great blog post out there called "How Do We Know Local News is Good for Democracy?" And a lot of the research is showing that when reliable, trusted sources of local news in a community go away, civic engagement, all sorts of civic engagement indicators decline. So just think about right now, we're in an election year, how do you get reliable information about who's running? Who's asking candidates tough questions that you want to be asking, but you're putting it on an amplified platform so that all of our neighbors can hear. So when we talk about the importance of local news, I also think it's important to have a distinction between, we're not talking about Fox, cable news or CNN or national news. It's really who's showing up every week at the school board and kind of on behalf of the other neighbors in our community, just reporting out what's going on. That's the kind of fundamental building block of democracy, and when that goes away, there is research that shows that so many things decline. So is that
Anybody else want to jump in? Any other comments? Kim?
So the noise that our project is called Above the Noise, and the noise is exactly what Melissa just said. It's what's up here that's causing a lot of polarization and division, and we also know that that is at an all-time low for trust. What is still trusted, and this is some of the work that Colorado Media Project has done, is we know that there is a high level of trust with your local journalist. So the person that you see at your school board meetings, in your grocery store, around town, they're a part of your community. We have a lot of trust there, but we don't have a lot of capacity. And that's one of the solutions that we've really been focused on, as collectively as a group and also with the leadership of Colorado Media Project.
Thank you. So some of you may have seen in the news in the last day or so that we have learned that we have a handful of rural newspapers in our state that are closing. The Burlington Record, the Plainsman Herald, the Lamar Ledger have all announced that they're going to be closing. And we know the impact that that's going to have on those communities. Probably got some folks in this room who are from those communities. So I'm just curious, what is the effect that this is actually going to have on those community members? And why is it important for accountability in those communities as well that this kind of thing get addressed?
So we have, if you are interested to go online, there's a really interesting project out of Colorado College. You can access it from the Colorado Media Project website. It's called the Colorado News Mapping Project. And it really attempts to get your arms around all the sources of news in a community. It has both the kind of professional, quote unquote, sources of journalism that you think about, like maybe your local newspaper or the radio station or even online news sources. But it also talks about Facebook pages and other community-generated sources that people say that they trust. And so we recognize that, when a newspaper goes away, there are other ways that people are getting information. So just want to acknowledge that. And at the same time, we've seen when, especially in communities that don't have any other sources. In the Denver metro, if some of you live there or on the Front Range, you might feel overwhelmed by the number of places you can get news. But in some communities, especially rural communities, there's only one or maybe two sources in an entire county. And so those types of places, we're thinking really hard about what emerges, what are sustainable models when the local newspaper goes dark. There's a really great story about what happened in Florence. I might hand it over to Kim if you want to tell that story.
Is anyone here from Florence? No Florence representation. Well, this will be a good story then. So Florence, where most of us might know it as where the largest prison system is in the United States, is also a really wonderful town that had a paper called the Florence Reporter. It had been there for about 130 years. It was a family-owned paper. It wasn't a hedge fund that came in. It wasn't Gannett. It wasn't one of these major corporations. It was just that the family didn't want to run the paper anymore, and they retired. And so there was no local paper. At the same time, there was a scare with the water source that was in Florence, and members of people that live in Florence were actually having toxins in their water. There was no one to report on it. At the same time, the entire city council, I'm not going to make any suggestions here of why they may have left, but they all quit, which triggered Polis to come in and make some legislation that can't happen in a city anymore. So here's Florence. The citizens need really critical health information for their livelihood, and there's no one to cover it. So the community got together, and Kevin, who is now the manager and editor of the Florence Reporter, was just a community member, but he had a background in community organizing, and his community got together in a park with a whiteboard, and they voted and said, so Kevin, you're going to be the one that's going to take this. And Kevin kind of said, I thought I was just going to vote for the person that was going to do it, and Kevin is now the managing editor and reporter. He works out of a coffee shop. He is a one-man newspaper, but it's actually doing really, really well. Our team at Rocky Mountain Public Media was there last night running some community engagement to help build some capacity for Kevin because his community trusts him and his community knows him. And now if something like that should ever happen again, they have a resource that they can go to that's trusted, that's a part of their community.
I was just going to add, I also have a mediation background, and out of crisis can come opportunity. And so while, we keep hearing this shocking news about it, another, small rural newspaper or major newspaper shutters its doors, what's the opportunity? And that's a great example. And so one thing I love in Colorado that's been happening is this conversation across media platforms, the local public radio station or commercial station collaborating with the newspaper or collaborating with an online digital source. And okay, we have to work together because our communities are relying on us, and the silos of, that's my competitor. We absolutely in the media cannot, we have to drop those silos because it's a model that doesn't work anymore, and it's very patriarchal, and there's much better ways to do things. So I'm a firm believer that these kind of crises are terrible, and there's a great opportunity there. And I think, I want to thank the funders in this room that see that opportunity and are supporting those kind of collaborations.
Yeah, I'll add to that, and I'm a believer in that as well. I think Colorado does it very well in collaboration amongst newsrooms and just multimedia platforms. I believe communities that are well-informed can make good decisions for themselves, for their families, and sometimes you just don't know what you don't know. And so I've identified my assignment just to educate and inform and just reveal the full picture of what is happening in community. Sometimes it's not that you're not seeking it out, it's just you don't know. And so I think with the funding and just the collaboration models have really been a game changer. And I do want to just say, as all of us have our own stories, just to empower you to, identify what is this unique lens that your organization or just you as an individual have as you're sharing different communication pieces throughout your newsletters and just within community, I think it's bigger than the newsrooms themselves, but just recognizing your power in just sharing the unique lens that you have.
Thank you. Thank you all. Perfect bridge into kind of the next question I have. It is definitely true in Colorado that, a lot of the local news entities, newsrooms, outlets, you all represent different forms of that, end up being some of the most trusted deliverers of information and news to the communities. And, we're not talking about mainstream news here, right? I think Tammy said it earlier. And one of the things that I think has been so amazing to see kind of from the funder side is at the local news level, I really view a lot of these newsrooms as not just a newsroom. I view them as community-based organizations. You're doing community engagement. We've talked a lot as a panel and as a group about what that community engagement looks like. I think this is where that intersection with the nonprofit world comes in a really different way. The old school kind of way of thinking about public relations and sending a press release out and hoping and praying that it gets picked up. Those days are kind of over. And I would love for especially maybe Brittany and you, Tammy, to talk a little bit about what it looks like for you all to build trust and what is community engagement. And Kim, too, I know you shared some examples around like what community engagement is and what it looks like from a newsroom standpoint, just to kind of open that world up to our attendees a little bit. And Brandy, I'll start with you.
Yes, thank you. Well, the Denver Urban Spectrum, I do want to just spend a little time talking about what I call this legacy publication. It has been spreading the news about people of color since 1987, and I think with that mission, there's been a lot of just evolution throughout the 37 years. I know that with the writing that we do and the journalists that we involve, representation has been our bread and butter, if you will, and just being able to tell the stories that are about us, coming straight from community. The Spectrum started as a way for people to share their stories, just to amplify and have a platform to just share the positivity in community, really reclaiming that narrative and highlighting, what is actually happening. So I think, Black-owned media has been a passion of mine that, you don't necessarily see the funding coming where it needs to come. But I do think that the work that we're doing at the Spectrum has been incredible. And we have a lot of different initiatives that have not only changed the narrative, but we've gone into expanding the narrative, involving different creators and just content creators that are doing the work. They've earned the trust of community, which I think the Spectrum has also, because it was born out of community, the trust is there, and I don't take that for granted. I think it's an honor to be that type of institution in community, but with expanding the narrative, we've actually launched a podcast network that does invite community in and have all of these different voices being able to amplify their stories. And I think this multimedia, being multifaceted in that way, has also been a game changer for us and just helping us stay relevant and being that asset to community. So I think, trust is something we don't take lightly, but we hold it highly, and I think we're just in service to community because of it.
Yeah, thanks for that. The KSUT, as I mentioned, was founded by the Southern Ute Tribe in 1976 and has To this day, our tribal radio signal now has expanded to not only serve the Southern Ute tribe, but the Ute Mountain Ute tribe. We have a partnership with the Ute Mountain Ute tribe and have a signal up on Hermano Peak, which is the knees of the sleeping Ute. And we serve, get way out into Monument Valley and the northeastern portion of the Navajo Nation and Hickory Apache Nation. So a lot of the work that we do with our tribal radio signal is about continuing that legacy of providing news and information, and just some basic information. Oh, this road is flooded, it's closed, there's no other way. Folks that have no internet are going to be able to get that information than listening to the radio, on actual radio, and not streaming. And so we've put a lot of thought into how can we expand that role? And so we, with support of some different funders in this room, have created a tribal media center about 3 years ago, which we have partnerships with Rocky Mountain PBS and Fort Lewis College to provide opportunities for content creation by Indigenous youth and young adults that then gets distributed on a wider platform and a lot of different multimedia platforms. So in terms of, is that hard news? No, but it's engagement, it's elevating voices, it's sharing everyday stories of folks in the communities that we serve and reflecting that back, but then also to a broader audience. And so that community engagement, it's been really exciting to be part of, that evolution of what tribal radio originally started out as. And how can we continue to be a leader in the realm of Indigenous storytelling? It's been an exciting several years, and the story's still being told.
Kim?
So for me to talk about community engagement, I always want to frame it as this is a system change, is what we're looking to do. And to really build trust, you have to name that the system was built in a way that was not going to recognize many of us, and there was extreme harm that's been caused. I experienced that myself growing up as a queer woman, and I never saw my lived experience. I couldn't get information about it. I couldn't see that there was a path or a life for me that wasn't going to end with either being kicked out of my family. My wife, who is non-binary and identifies as transgender, that they weren't going to, have their bladder explode because they couldn't use a bathroom that was going to feel safe to them. And so I think sometimes when we talk about community engagement, we have to look at the system in which media had been operating. And sometimes this can make me really unpopular. I love Taylor Swift too. When she says, "Hi, it's me, I'm the problem, it's me," that's how I can feel sometimes in rooms, because we have to name what it was. There's a lens of objectivity that purposely put people of different lived experiences off the page. And when that happens, the internalization that can happen to a person is incredibly destructive and harmful. So community engagement to me is about looking at that system. Where do we have to acknowledge the harm that's been caused? And how do you start to build trust? Because you can't build trust without acknowledging what happened. So to do that, it is a lot of listening and centering that person's experience. You have to travel. You have to be where community is. You cannot expect community to come to you. Why would you? If your life experience hasn't been reflected accurately, what would make me want to come and listen and talk to you and trust you with my lived experience? And we have to have people in newsrooms that have lived that experience too.
Another good segue.
I'm very passionate about this.
Mm-hmm. I feel it. It's good. I think everyone in the room is. And part of what we wanted to talk about in this discussion today is around how do we help ensure that local news is representing inclusive narratives. We know there's not enough of that. We know there's a lot of work that's taking shape to get us there, get us better. We actually at the foundation recently commissioned a media scan and a social listening analysis in a handful of communities across the state, some places that many of you call home. And, there were some themes that came out of that, across the scan itself. We saw that there was certainly not enough local news coverage that was focusing on equity issues or root cause issues. So that, was a big standout gap for us. But also, we found that a lot of the voices that were being centered in coverage are from white people and those who are economically advantaged in communities. And also that sources tend to be people who are in positions of more traditional power. And so I want to ask the panel a little bit about, what are some of the things that are happening within Colorado that are helping us get past that? How are we going to help journalists diversify their sources? How are we going to get to a place where we're centering some of the voices and stories that have just been invisible and unheard of for far too long?
I can start, and then we can segue into the actual what's going on. But we asked ourselves that too. How do we get at this? Where do we start? And so, for the media project, before we started trying to fix the problem, we decided we needed to do some listening ourselves and research. And so we worked with Colorado News Collaborative and Free Press and designed some listening. It was happening right around the beginning of 2020. We were planning. We were planning on going out into the communities and doing some listening. Of course, COVID happened, and then George Floyd. All these things kind of gave momentum to a project called the Voices Project. And it brought journalists of color and community members of color together to talk about what was wrong and what was right about our local media ecosystem, and what they wanted to see. And you can go to our website or the CoLab website and see 4 separate reports. We know we didn't cover every single community in the state, but we have Black voices, Latino voices, Indigenous voices, and HPI voices, sorry. And these are recommendations, and they all had very similar themes. More representation in newsrooms, more culturally sensitive, framing, and things that are historically not what newsrooms excel at. And so I think that hearing from community members and journalists of color was really influential in setting out some priorities. And we have had 3 rounds of funding that we've put behind that, and huge thanks to the Colorado Health Foundation for investing in that. We had a number of foundations put into the fund, and we've had at least 25 or 27 grantees per year working on these things. So everything from internal DEI work. We've supported outlets that are led by and for people of color and rural communities. We're also interested in lifting up unheard voices from rural communities. But I just think that we have to start with listening about what the problems are and really design solutions that address them directly and fund those things, because this is an ecosystem that needs some fundamental change and some different ways of thinking. And I think what I'm most hopeful for is that what we see is that there's so much eagerness and willingness on the part of the journalists that are still in the field. And I say still because there's probably half as many journalists in the state of Colorado as there were 15 years ago. This is a side note to our conversation, but there's just a monumental shift in the business model. And I think the bright side of that is that newsroom business models are becoming more and more nonprofit. They're looking more and more like public media. They're mission aligned with many of y'all to really serve communities. And so I think that's a huge opportunity. And with some of the advancing equity and local news work that we've been supporting, it's just been really inspiring to see how some of that is playing out. And I pass it now over to some of these ladies who are doing this work.
Thank you, Melissa. I will just say I've done a lot of different things in my life, and my background is in nonprofit. This is a very special moment in time because it took me 20 years to get back to my first love in journalism. But the work that is happening with, philanthropy and being these organizations and these, community institutions, I think, that's my calling. That's what I'm here for, is just to gather community. With all the community listening that we've been doing, it's just been a perfect merge of my skills and talents. And I think that the opportunity lies within just the social space. I know my background is in print media as well as radio, and both of those have just taken a hit. I mean, it's been a long time that digital has been dominant. And if you're not showing up in those spaces, you think your message is getting lost. And, is anybody still picking up the newspaper as you consider, how do you get your news? I'm always curious to have those conversations with people, and especially those of a younger generation, how is information being consumed? I think we're very much in a attention economy, and it's so much noise. I'm like, so much noise. It's like, what is your stopping power in breaking through that noise? With the Urban Spectrum and just the work that we're doing, we've been involved in an ethnic media exchange where we're just trying to reimagine, how are we unlocking funds to have a sustainable model, so we're not just tracking down ads for this month or this week. But really building a model where, we're going to corporate institutions, getting funding, and really just sharing it with the ecosystem. Like, that's where I see a lot of opportunity, and amplifying those voices again that represent the diverse communities here in Colorado. This is my home, my heart, and I do think that there's a lot of potential there. So that's what I'm, basing my next strategies on. And of course, everyone's invited to do the same, and just seeing how you're engaging with your local media and identifying those that are meeting the specific audience that you have in common.
Go team.
Yeah, it's interesting. Another similarity I have with you, Brittany, is I was in community radio in Durango probably 25 years ago for about a decade, and then circled out and did a bunch of other things for 20 years in the nonprofit world. Circled back into public media about 8 or 9, 10 years ago. So it's wonderful to circle back. So I've been involved in the nonprofit world my whole life, and so I've been on both sides, right? I run KSUT now, but I'm the president of a board, a nonprofit arts making board over in Memphis, and so I'm on that side of how do I get the attention? There's a really great thing happening here. How do I get the attention of the media? We can't report it on ourselves, I mean, we could, but probably wouldn't be a good look. So I would just say, and I love what Dr. T said about just, what's working? What are we doing? What's an amazing success story that you and your nonprofits, if you're in the nonprofit world, that you would love to have be elevated, and hopefully you've got that rapport and relationship beyond just sending out the press release, with the key media partners. So, whether you're in, a major metro area or a very small community, I understand it's easier in a smaller community to know people and those folks in media, but make a relationship outside of when you want their attention. Develop a relationship, and then if there's something really exciting happening that you would love, just pitch the story, pitch the idea. And I know you've all probably done that, but I so agree with Dr. T. There's just that enthusiasm and what's working in the media. We get tired of the deficit reporting, and it's hard sometimes. I mean, I run an NPR affiliate, and I can't listen on my way home because I just need some space. So that excitement about what's working, this is a great example of a model that might work, and have those relationships that are already as strong as you can make them with your key media partners. But one thing I just wanted to speak to briefly about, we at KSUT received an Advancing Equity in Local News grant 2.5 years ago, We hired at KSUT with a community station in Cortez, KSJD, we received funds to share a full-time news reporter to solely focus, it's called Voices from the Edge of the Colorado Plateau. And Clark predominantly reports on indigenous issues. He also reports on LGBTQ and Latinx things going on and community voices that aren't heard as much as they should be. And so it's been a wonderful opportunity to partner with the Southern Ute Tribe and the Ute Mountain Ute Tribe and different community organizations that are working in those communities and populations to say, what are the stories you would love for us to be able to share and tell? And it doesn't have to be hard news. Yes, we do report on those things that are, hard news in terms of timely and events happening that people need to know about. But what are the community engagement stories? The community stories that are happening, like the Tri-Ute Games that just happened in Ignacio, which rotate between Ignacio and Toyac and the Northern Ute communities in Utah, and the youth coming together to compete. Like, what a great story, and elevate those voices and just expand the awareness of all the great things happening in these communities that people would likely not otherwise hear. And so it's been a great project, and we're hoping to continue that project and expand it. So just an example.
Yeah, I'll pick up the thread here because I work with all of my colleagues on this project, which is Above the Noise, which is a long-term sustainable listening model that works for not just Rocky Mountain Public Media, but right now we're working with 40 newsrooms across the state. And so the key thing there's two things that Tammy said that I really want to highlight. One is that listening needs to be done in an asset-based community development mindset. It has been too long that media has been in it, and of course we have to be responsible for when there is harm that we need to report on, but we also equally have to do the assets. It's important for community, because communities know what's working, and we have to be able to amplify that so the connection is there. The second part that Tammy mentioned, which is really key to this project, is rethinking a system that had us competing against each other. And so public media, because we're funded differently than a lot of local newsrooms, we're not immune to advertisers. We just call it underwriting spots. That's a small percentage of where our funding comes from. We are, of course, always under threat from where Congress is going to be in the national funding that we get. But the majority of our funding, more than 50%, comes from individuals. We're the largest member organization in the state of Colorado. So we're not beholden to some of the same clicks that we need to get. We're not beholden to advertisers, and we are committed to the narratives that are going to be much more reflective of what is happening in a community. So to do the community listening, it's what I love about public media, and I've worked in independent and I've worked in commercial, but for public, we can reinvent what that means. You're going to hear me talk a lot about systems. I always want to know what systems aren't working and what systems can we change that are going to be better reflective of the public, because that's why public media is here. So for public media, where can we be a capacity builder, and how can we think of that as a systems change? So for our project, a lot of the newsrooms we work with, you're talking 1 or 2 person newsrooms. They are amazing community listeners. They have the total desire to do it, but I've been on with reporters that are trying to fix the heat and hit a deadline at the same time. They're not going to have the time to be able to go out and build huge community listening sessions, but public media can. And that's where, to pick up again on what Tammy said, we can't be in competition with each other. We have to recognize where our strengths and assets are and how we link those together. PBS doesn't need to come in, I love this word, Columbus, who your local journalist is. You're going to trust your local journalist. So how can we build the capacity for that journalist to do what they need to do to be able to hear what you need to tell them? And so it's a reinvention of how we think of public media, which has been really exciting.
Mm-hmm. I'll just add on to that too. I mean, with an invitation, there is such a big opportunity right now to partner with your local newsroom to do some of this work. You know how to do community listening. You know how to fill a room with people who have thoughts and ideas about how to make things better, And so I think that there is, to go back to Taryn's, one of your original points is just rethinking what your role is with your local news. I love all the thoughts that are being, Adrian and, from Warm Cookies and whatnot. I remember going to a really fun event that Warm Cookies put on a while back called Own the Media. They had a series about how do you reframe the way you think about government, the way you think about media. This is our media. This is our government, and we can own it. And so I just put that charge out, to not only, like we said, think about the stale models of sending in press releases. How about having a coffee with a journalist, getting to know them as a person and kind of becoming a reliable source for them, because there are fewer of them, and they need you, they need all of you to really care about the information sources that the broader community, and they want to hear the stories you have to tell. So I just extend that, in addition to, public media and the role, it's also the role of the broader nonprofit world to really, embrace this new kind of model, I think, for public service journalism.
Thank you, guys. Well, just a reminder, if anyone has questions, definitely send those up our way. We have a little bit of time left, and I want to continue kind of this conversation around the relationship with the nonprofit sector. And I also want to invite a couple of maybe overviews of different projects that I know we haven't gotten to yet. There's so many exciting projects happening in journalism across our state. We could never get to all of them. I do want to note that we will include a whole bunch of different resources in the mobile site for all of you. And also, and Tammy, I'm going to ask you to talk about Native Lens for just a second. We also have a Native Lens, which is a project that Tammy will share that's going to be running just outside here in the registration area for the rest of the day, just so folks can get a little bit of a taste of that special project. But if you each could sort of send our attendees off with a call to action, right, around how to think about local news as a partner that maybe you're just not envisioning right at this moment, picking up on where you left it, Melissa, what would each of you offer to the group?
I'll start very brief. I'll say stay curious. That's really where I think, ideas are generated, and I think ideas just make the world go round. So staying curious, asking questions, and feeling empowered to get to know your local journalists, get to know just how you're utilizing your platforms as an organization and as an individual, just really reclaiming and telling your story, knowing that it has power.
I'll speak just for a quick minute about Native Lens, but to answer your question, Taryn, I think, and playing off something Melissa said is, in the media, we want your stories. We need your stories, and I know sometimes it might feel like, I send the press releases, they never report, but take that extra step, find that interesting, unique story that you get excited about, and be persistent and build those relationships. And it's especially in public media, we rely on you. We can't be the eyes and ears everywhere. You are the eyes and the ears of what's happening in the community, and be persistent in the desire to elevate your stories and have them be heard. And again, there's never been an opportunity like there is now in Colorado for the engagement, the civic engagement. Again, Colorado is leading the way throughout the country, from what I can see and have heard from other states, in this community engagement. So real quick, Native Lens is a wonderful partnership with Rocky Mountain Public Media that came about right at the beginning of COVID. The thought was, wow, it was when we were hearing how horrible things were out on the Navajo Nation, and it was this curiosity, wow, what's going on? be great to hear first-person stories of what's happening. And so that was the idea for Native Lens, and it's become a really wonderful project. Again, partnership, we have a fellowship that we partner with Durango Independent Film Festival. It's first-person storytelling, filmmaking. We work to empower community members anywhere throughout North America for anyone who identifies as Indigenous to share their story with using their phone, or whatever it might be, and then we support them in editing and on the story, and then it goes out on the platform to a very wide audience. And so we have dozens and dozens of stories from representation from throughout Indian country, throughout North America. So it's really exciting. It's still a young project, but we include training now. A big part of what we do is training Indigenous youth and young adults in how to tell their stories through that media platform. So again, check out Native Lens. It'll be on the screen out all day in the ballroom.
Is this the call to action? Call to action? Okay. As public media, we work for the public. And so I'm going to share a small bit of data. You can read this book called The Other Divide. I met with the author. If you also listen to Ezra Klein's podcast, she was just recently on it. But right now we're seeing about an 80-20 divide in community listening with media. And this isn't necessarily just for Colorado, this is nationally. So 80% of the folks we don't hear from. The 20% that we are hearing from are white, older, male, tend to be fairly wealthy, can be retired, and they lean Democratic. And so the data is a little bit skewed in a way, though, because for a lot of folks in that sort of category that don't identify as Democratic, they're also not very trusting of academia or media, so it's really hard to capture that information. So that 80% that we need to hear from, you guys might be in that 80%, and we would really love to hear from you. That is part of what is pushing these hyper-polarized narratives, is because the media is only hearing from that 20% that's sitting at their computer, hitting refresh, refresh, refresh. You need to hear from me. So when we're doing community engagement, we're looking specifically to engage that 80%. And so the way that we do that is through a program called Ambassador 64. I welcome all of you to come to our website or to find me after, and I'll give you the information on it. This is 64 for 64 counties in Colorado, and it's a statewide listening network. It's where we're looking for people in every county, in every lived experience, that are willing to come and share with us what their life is like. That framing sometimes is so key for us getting the narrative and storytelling correct. A quick example of it, we were hosting a food for thought dinner where people get to come and just sort of share their lived experience. If you ask anyone what's the biggest issue in Colorado, we always hear housing. So I had one person say, housing is the biggest issue, but here's the thing, you can live in many cities and you can have an hour-long commute each way, and it's really not a big deal. And the person at the other end of the table said, okay, but let's not think of it in terms of commuting, let's think of it in terms of time equity. What am I losing by not having the time to have a short commute? What does that mean for my childcare? What does that mean for wear and tear in my car insurance, gas? That's a little bit what we need to hear. Because if the framing is just from one side and hearing it from one person, it can push the content in a way that is not going to be reflective of what's really happening and what really matters to Coloradans. So Ambassador 64, I encourage you all to take a look at it or come find me afterwards. It is a long-term sustainable listening model. And that information gets shared not just with Rocky Mountain Public Media, but with all of our participating newsrooms across the state.
That's awesome. I love that so much. For my call to action, I'm going to share a little bit about a project that is being led by the Colorado News Collaborative, and Tina Griego is somewhere in this room. She is one of the masterminds behind it, along with Megan Verley at CPR. And, when we talk about flipping the narrative, nowhere is that probably more important than in elections coverage. And Voter Voices is an effort. It's also a statewide collaborative with about 40 newsrooms participating. You might have seen the poll on a lot of different websites or on TV or radio, or heard about it on radio, but it's really trying to flip the question from, and the lens from the candidate focus. What do the candidates want to talk about? What are their issues? Let's let them frame the conversation, to asking the public, you all, and the people that you serve, what do you want the candidates to be talking about as they compete for your vote? And I love that simple flip. And then the newsrooms that are participating are really committed to taking that information and using it to drive their elections coverage this session, or this election season. So it's timely. You can have an impact, and I encourage you to check out and see if your local newsroom is participating, and check out the Colorado News Collaborative or the CPR landing pages, and you can find out more about this initiative.
Thank you. Y'all, the hardest thing about this is you guys have great questions. I mean, there's a ton of questions that we are not going to get to. So I'm gonna live into my dual role here, and I'm gonna commit to answering all these questions along with these lovely panelists of mine, and we'll share responses to all these questions back out with you via email from the foundation. So just know that's coming. There is definitely a predominant theme in the questions around misinformation and disinformation, and we would be remiss for not acknowledging it. We are not going to have time to talk about it extensively, but I know in our preparation we talked about Common Cause, which is a specific hotline, I believe, for nonprofits. And I'm wondering if one of you would just talk for a moment about that, so folks in the room know what it is. And again, we'll share out some additional thinking and tips and just guidance around this with all of you in the audience.
So yeah, this is a great resource, and Common Cause Colorado, as I understand it, has a coalition of nonprofits that they're working with, but really to get the word out about, if you have folks that you work with that are seeing mis and disinformation, they have a hotline. So you can go to the Common Cause Colorado. We'll include it in the links afterwards, because I know they have a catchy name for it, and I'm just blanking out. But that's one way, and then also, I think there's a lot of just good media hygiene tips about if you see mis and disinformation. The first thing is don't amplify it. That's one of the things that when we talk with journalists, it's kind of tempting to say, oh, there's this crazy piece of misinformation out there, and then the media picks it up, and then all of a sudden everyone commits that to memory. So, we're working with media partners to kind of avoid that knee-jerk reaction, but I think all of us can be a part of the solution. Also, we didn't get to talk about AI, which is just completely upending so many pieces of our society, but I just want to say that I think what it says to me is that convening in spaces like this in person, face-to-face, knowing your neighbor, having a source for local news that you trust, that you know the name of, and you know the people who maybe even work there, is just going to be more important. And so I hope that each of you has a source like that and a relationship like that with one that you can trust.
Kim, did you want to do just a quick plug on Above the Noise? I know you referenced it earlier, but it's really active right now. I know you're heading to Salida later today for a doc screening, so just want to lift that up for a moment.
So Above the Noise, part of what we're working on right now, because polarization is and the loss of civility between us is something that's at a fever pitch. And it's also, when we are together, it is really hard to hate your neighbor once you know their story. And so our goal with Above the Noise, and we're doing this tonight in Salida, you all are busy, apparently you're here, I'm driving to Salida, But you can come to our website and see where we're doing above the noise engagements and events. And part of what we learned from doing community listening is that Coloradans, even though we are kind of a purplish state, we're Bobert and Polis, Coloradans actually don't want a lot of division with each other. But they lack the skills to be able, when they are hearing misinformation from someone or a lack of civility one-on-one, they lack the skill to be able to call it out in the moment and say, hey, I think maybe there's a different way for us to talk about this. So with our newsrooms, we're going around the state and we screen a film called Undivide Us. And that film sort of sets the tone for how you can talk about issues that you care about, and how you might want to frame them or see them in a different way. We also have Martin Carason from CSU, who is one of our partners. He is the head of the Center for Public Deliberation. He comes and does some capacity building and training. And these conversations, the folks that have been coming to them, I think we have 100 people tonight in Salida. They're going to be leading right up to the election. After the election, I'm thinking our theme from Above the Noise is going to go to reconciliation, because we have to come back together. But please join us. These are free events. They are open to the public. You can get all the information on our website.
Thank you. And in those resources, I also want to make sure that we include some information about the ethnic media exchange. I'm so glad you brought that up, Brittany, because I think another just area of work that I think it's important for everyone in this room to know about. So we'll get busy putting our journal, I think we're almost all journalists on the, are we all journalists? All right, we all like to write content, so we're going to provide some content for all of you. And before I say thank you to all of you and ask for a hand of applause, I do want to give just a quick plug. So tomorrow at this conference, we're going to have 3 different workshops. They're going to be really focused on capacity building, so letting you all kind of get your hands into some of the incredible things we've been learning around narrative change. And Tina Griego from CoLab will be managing one of those workshops that's focusing on how nonprofits can leverage their relationships with media. I know that she's also going to be doing some education around a tool called Amplify Colorado, which is specifically focused on diversifying sources for journalists all across the state. It's an incredible resource that nonprofits should know about, and feel free to point their communities to, that will, again, just get to this goal around more inclusive local news, generally speaking. So can I have a round of applause for this amazing panel? And I know you guys all want to go and eat, and I have a feeling we're going to go like hole ourselves up, and we could probably stay together for a long time continuing to talk about this. But before you all go out to lunch, which should be ready for everyone, one more thing. So Erin Brown this morning showed up in her beautiful t-shirt, gave us a wonderful welcome. We do have t-shirts for all of you. You'll see up on the screen. We've got 3 different types of t-shirts. They're offered in both English and Spanish. They have some empowering messages, slogans for all of you. We want to invite all of you to go and pick a t-shirt. The t-shirt station is going to be right outside these doors in the registration area. Pick one up, and we are hoping that everyone will wear them tomorrow to the final day of the Colorado Health Symposium. So thank you all again. Thanks for such a great morning. I hope everyone enjoys the afternoon. Yes, thanks.